Imagine a chemist at the University of Kansas. He has spent years building a sterling reputation, fully integrated into the Western academic system. But then the atmosphere shifts. He suddenly finds himself the target of a federal investigation, accused of hiding ties to China. He spends 5 grueling years fighting a legal nightmare. In 2024, he is finally acquitted, fully exonerated. You'd expect this to be a moment of relief, a return to normalcy. But it wasn't. His reputation was shattered, his research stalled, and the trust was irrevocably broken. And he isn't the only one looking for the exit. This individual tragedy signals a massive, silent shift in the global order. Look at Song Sun, a star mathematician at Berkeley, or Sun Xiaokong, a leading cancer researcher who called the U.S. home for 30 years. They didn't leave because they failed, they left because the environment changed. Since the U.S. launched initiatives intended to protect its science, the number of Chinese scientists abandoning the U.S. has skyrocketed by 75%. The irony is staggering. In a frantic attempt to lock down intellectual property, the West is inadvertently driving its top talent and their future discoveries straight back to Beijing.
That is an incredibly powerful framing, and the gravity of that shift cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
We are witnessing a large-scale, systematic reversal of the global brain drain narrative that, really defined science and technology for the last half-century.
Right. For decades, it was a one-way street.
It was. The path for the world's most ambitious scientific talent led west, to the U.S., to Europe. Now that path is reversing, and I think it's happening faster than most observers realize.
So today, our mission for this deep dive is to really understand the mechanics of this reversal. We need to go beyond just the headlines and investigate how China's visionary national talent strategies, these robust repatriation programs, are, successfully cultivating a world-leading scientific workforce.
And that workforce is absolutely crucial for their national goals.
Exactly, for achieving that technological self-reliance and driving their national modernization.
Right. We will then drill down on the empirical data, examining the transformative influence of these highly skilled Chinese returnee scientists. How are they enhancing domestic research output, fostering cutting-edge innovation, and this is critical, elevating the global standing of China's universities and research institutions almost overnight?
Almost overnight. And finally, we have to analyze the strategic knowledge shift itself, the geopolitical implications. This is about China strategically attracting top-tier scientific talent and positioning itself as a pivotal hub for future scientific breakthroughs, for leadership in these critical emerging technologies. It really does fundamentally alter global dynamics.
It's a whole new ballgame.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the grand design, right? The national blueprint that really set this entire machine in motion. For decades, if you wanted something manufactured cheap and fast, you went to China.
It was the world's factory.
The world's factory, yeah. The source of low-tech goods powered by these massive, low-cost labor pools.
And that low-tech production model worked exceptionally well. I mean, for 2 generations, it created immense wealth and lifted, hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. It was a huge success.
But it had a shelf life.
Had a very hard expiration date. And the strategic leadership in China recognized that. You had wages rising, environmental costs were mounting, and the nation was facing that daunting challenge of the middle income trap.
I've heard that term. What exactly does that mean in this context?
It's where an economy gets stuck.
Yeah.
It stagnates because it can no longer compete on cheap building. Labor wages are too high. But it hasn't yet developed the high-tech capabilities, the innovation, to compete with, say, Germany or the U.S.
So you're stuck in the middle, not cheap, but not advanced either.
Exactly. And that's a trap. So the first strategic phase was this very explicit national decision to move away from being the workshop of the world and towards becoming a technology creator.
A powerhouse.
A technology-intensive powerhouse.
Oh.
Absolutely. The goal was simple, but, revolutionary in its scale, systematically growing its manufacturing and capabilities further up the value chain.
So shifting from just making the plastic casing for a phone to designing the chip inside it.
Precisely. From producing basic components to owning the intellectual property and the really advanced manufacturing processes for the final goods.
And the detailed, actionable blueprint for this massive economic and industrial transition is Made in China 2025, MIC 2025. This wasn't just a political talking point then. It was a comprehensive, targeted national plan.
Oh, it was very real. MIC 2025 was launched by Premier Li Keqiang back in May 2015. And what's fascinating is its strategic lineage. It wasn't invented out of thin air.
Oh, Where did it come from?
It was inspired by and adapted from Germany's own Industry 4.0 strategy, their plan for digitizing and automating manufacturing.
So they looked at one of the best in the world.
They looked at arguably the world's most successful high-end manufacturing economy, scaled that vision up exponentially, and embedded it into their centralized 5-year planning structure. The ambition is explicit to become a world-leading manufacturing power by the middle of the next decade.
And the core goal, as you mentioned, is this idea of technological self-reliance. It's about cutting the cord, right? Reducing dependence on foreign suppliers for critical components, especially in these high-tech sectors.
Precisely. That drive for self-sufficiency is the absolute heart of the policy, and the targets they laid out were incredibly aggressive.
How aggressive are we talking?
The goals included increasing the Chinese domestic content of core materials and key components to 40% by 2020. Okay, that's step one.
40% in 5 years.
And then pushing that number even further to a staggering 70% by 2025.
70%. Why that number specifically?
Because that level of domestic control ensures resilience. It protects you against geopolitical shocks, sanctions, trade wars. It allows the nation to dictate its own pace of technological advancement without being held hostage by anyone else's supply chain.
They saw the writing on the wall.
They understood that breakthroughs in areas like chip technology or advanced robotics would have massive cascading effects across all other industrial sectors. If you control the core, you control the ecosystem.
Okay, so to achieve that level of self-reliance and to do it so quickly, that requires an unprecedented commitment of financial resources. This isn't just incremental funding we're talking about.
I don't know. This is capital mobilization on an epic national scale. The scale is almost hard to grasp.
Give us the numbers.
The initial direct commitment was roughly $300 billion, dedicated specifically to achieving the industrial plan across the 10 targeted sectors.
$300 billion. That's already a huge number.
But the commitment only accelerated. Following global economic shifts, especially during the post-2020 recovery period, there were subsequent major investments that pushed the overall spending far, far higher.
How much higher?
We're talking about at least an additional $1.4 trillion directed toward massive infrastructure buildouts that directly support these MIC 2025 goals.
$1 trillion. That's a figure that demands some context. What exactly does $1.4 trillion even buy you? Is it just factories?
It's much broader and far more fundamental than just physical factory space. That money went into building the underlying smart manufacturing infrastructure.
What does that entail?
Think high-speed 5G networks, national-scale fiber optic lines, cloud computing centers, and massive industrial IoT Internet of Things platforms, all the digital plumbing necessary to run advanced automated factories.
So it's the nervous system for the new economy.
That's a great way to put it. This investment wasn't just about production capacity. It was about laying the digital groundwork for the fourth industrial revolution. They were ensuring that every new factory built could operate at maximum speed and efficiency. This commitment, it validates that the policy is central to their long-term economic and political stability.
And that amount of focused investment means the policy had to be extremely targeted. They had to pick winners, focusing on the future's most lucrative and strategic areas. Let's detail these 10 key industrial focus areas.
Right. The blueprint identified 10 key industries where China is explicitly targeting global leadership, aiming to surpass existing competitors. And these were not random choices.
How are they selected?
They were selected based on future market size, strategic dependency. So what do we need to control? And their potential to catalyze other industries.
Okay, let's break down the most critical ones.
Certainly. One critical area is information technology. That's a huge bucket. It spans everything from artificial intelligence and big data to the manufacturing of smart appliances and the development of the industrial internet. They recognize that data processing and AI are the new oil.
Okay, so IT is number one.
Then you have robotics and advanced manufacturing. This is all about moving beyond cheap manual labor to automated precision production. Third, aerospace and maritime engineering. We're talking high-tech ships, commercial aircraft, places where the technological gaps were vast, but closing those gaps means massive economic and military leverage.
And I imagine green energy is on that list.
Absolutely. Fourth is new energy vehicles, or NEVs, and green energy. This is where the world is shifting, and China made a huge strategic bet on leading the electric vehicle and lithium battery supply chains.
And what about the other half of the list?
We also have power equipment and high-tech rail equipment. And, they've already established dominance in high-speed rail. Then there's agricultural machinery and equipment, which is necessary for modernizing their domestic food production.
Makes sense.
New materials is another one. This involves advanced polymers, composites, things that are essential for everything from aerospace to chip fabrication. And finally, biotechnology, biomedicine, and medical devices. That's about ensuring domestic health security and getting access to cutting-edge treatments.
Semiconductors are often mentioned as the absolute linchpin of this whole plan, central to everything. Why is that sector so crucial?
Because semiconductors are the universal bottleneck. Every single item on that list we just went through, AI, NEVs, smart appliances, robotics, it all relies on advanced chips.
Nothing works without them.
Nothing. Failure to achieve self-reliance in semiconductors means that entire 70% domestic content goal becomes totally impossible. So the MIC 2025 initiative, therefore, strongly encouraged massive investment and increased production in the high-tech semiconductor value chain.
Okay.
They're aiming not just for assembly, but for the design, the fabrication, and the equipment production necessary to be fully self-sufficient.
So that was the plan and the money. The inevitable question is, has it actually worked? Has it delivered results? Despite global skepticism and, external efforts like sanctions and tariffs, how effective has this program been since 2015?
The evaluation, from what we can see, confirms profound strategic success. By 2024, objective analysis shows the majority of MIC 2025's goals have been largely achieved or even exceeded.
Really? Exceeded?
Yes. An analysis by one major Asian financial paper found that an estimated 86% of the policy's over 260 proposed goals have been fulfilled or are well underway toward completion.
86%. For a multi-trillion-dollar, multi-sector plan, that completion rate is remarkable.
It speaks to the effectiveness of the central planning mechanism and their ability to mobilize capital and talent simultaneously. It's really something to see.
Where can we see that success validated tangibly, on the global stage?
Well, just look at the sectors tracked by global intelligence firms. China has achieved global leadership, or at least near parity, in multiple critical technologies. High-speed rail networks, the production of graphene, the mass production and deployment of unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. Exactly. And most visibly, in the new energy vehicle and renewable energy sectors.
The NEV sector is a fantastic example. The original target was already pretty ambitious, wasn't it?
The target was to produce 3 million NEVs per year. But that was a target for 2025.
And what happened?
By 2023, they had already significantly surpassed that figure. They became the world's largest producer and consumer of electric vehicles, and critically, they now dominate the supply chain for the lithium batteries that power them.
So they own the whole ecosystem.
They're getting there. Their progress in shipbuilding, advanced manufacturing processes, and renewable power components like solar panels has similarly led to a confirmed, measurable technological dominance in those sectors. This level of comprehensive success, it just underscores China's rapidly increasing influence in industries that will define future global economic growth.
So we've established the grand strategy, the hardware, the funding, the industrial targets in MIC 2025. But like you said, money alone doesn't build an AI network or design a next-generation chip. So what's the engine that drives all of this? It has to be the people. The talent.
Absolutely. China needed millions of highly skilled, educated workers to execute this high-tech vision. The talent programs are the essential vehicle for realizing the ambitious goals set out in the national 5-year plans.
These plans actually mandate human capital increases.
Oh, yes. The targets are specific. For instance, the 12 5-year plan had this gargantuan goal of increasing the number of highly skilled workers from 114 million to 180 million by 2020.
Wow. It's an increase of 66 million people.
It's a massive number. And to do that, you need a systematic, national-level organizational structure. And that structure is this web of national, provincial, and municipal talent recruitment programs.
These programs operationalize the strategy. So let's start with the earliest one, the 100 Talents program. This dates all the way back to 1994, which shows this ambition for scientific mastery wasn't just invented for MIC 2025.
That's a great point. The 100 Talents program, or Baranjiwa, was launched in 1994. It was China's first major overseas-oriented program for high-level talent recruitment post-reforms, and it was specifically designed for cultivating top-tier scientific research personnel within the Chinese Academy of Sciences, or CAS.
CAS, their premier research institution.
Right. The goal was to replenish the scientific ranks after years of, limited overseas exposure during certain periods of their history.
And this program was designed to feed into the fundamental scientific structures of the nation, right? You mentioned things like the 973 program and the 863 program. What are those?
So these are key national scientific initiatives. The 973 program, which is a national basic research program, focused on funding large-scale, long-term basic research. The real blue sky fundamental science concepts.
The foundational stuff.
Exactly. Then the 8x63 program, or the National High-Tech R&D program, was focused on applied research and key high-technology development. It was about directly translating those scientific gains into strategic industrial uses.
So one is the idea, the other is the product.
A simplified but good way to think about it. And the 100 Talents program provided the human capital, the leaders, the principal investigators, needed to run these massive multi-year, multi-institutional projects. It ensured continuity and high-level management expertise.
So what did this program offer to attract scientists who had already built lives and careers abroad way back in 1994?
The incentives were, for the time, game-changing. Selectees were given 600,000 RMB, which was about $99,000 back then, just for resettlement costs. A huge sum, especially for things like housing.
That's a big draw.
But more importantly for the research, they received a substantial 2 million RMB, or about $330,000, in startup funding for their labs. This package was competitive enough to entice established researchers back to lead these huge national projects.
Okay, that brings us to the most famous, or maybe the most strategically significant program, the 1,000 Talents program, or TTP. This sounds like the 100 Talents program just scaled up exponentially.
It's the next evolution. It was launched in 2008, and that timing is very strategic.
How so?
They capitalized on the global financial crisis, which created a lot of uncertainty in Western academic hiring and funding.
Ah, so they saw an opportunity.
A huge one. Formally, it's known as the Recruitment Program of Global Experts, and TTP was explicitly tasked with recruiting ethnic Chinese experts from Western universities, major research centers, and private companies. The goal was a massive, rapid boost in critical science and technology fields.
So who was the ideal candidate for TTP? They were targeting senior established leaders, right?
Precisely. They were looking for high-impact individuals who could immediately confer prestige and expertise. Candidates generally needed to hold a full professorship at a prestigious foreign university or R&D institute.
So not postdocs.
No, not at all. Or they could be technical managerial professionals in senior roles at internationally known companies. They also targeted entrepreneurs who held critical intellectual property or key technologies. The whole program was designed to bring back scientists and engineers who were already masters of their craft.
And what were the benefits? Beyond the research funding, what did TTP offer that, say, a tenured professor in the U.S. might not have?
The benefits package was highly attractive and often customized. Participants were immediately granted a prestigious title, the 1,000 Talents Plan Distinguished Professor, which offered status and influence. They received high salaries, often comparable to or exceeding Western standards, guaranteed long-stay visas, and a significant one-time untaxed bonus.
How much was the bonus?
Typically 1 million RMB, which is about $150,000. But the real benefit was the resource environment.
What do you mean by that?
Substantial, non-competitive funding for research, administrative support, assistance with housing, and fast-tracked access to national grants. They were basically offering established leaders the ability to skip the bureaucratic grind of the Western system and focus purely on doing science.
But established leaders eventually retire. Innovation needs a continuous pipeline of new blood. And that's where the Young 1,000 Talents program, or YTT, comes in. This seems to be the most strategic component for long-term global competition.
It is, absolutely. The Young 1,000 Talents program is the strategic answer to the global competition for the next generation of scientific leaders. Launched later, it focused squarely on attracting high-caliber, early-career STEM scholars under the age of 40.
So they're betting on potential.
The strategic wisdom here is profound. You're not just getting a name. You are buying 30 years of potential productivity from someone at the absolute peak of their intellectual growth.
And what distinguished the YTT package? This was aimed at people who were likely still postdocs or junior faculty abroad?
The requirements were still highly selective. You typically needed 3 to 5 years of overseas working experience in a prestigious institution. But the package was designed not just to recruit them, but to instantly launch them into full independence.
How did they do that?
Participants received a very generous one-time award of 500,000 RMB, but the real leverage came from the research grants. They received competitive startup grants ranging from 1 to 3 million RMB from the central government.
And that's just the start.
Critically, yes. Those grants were often matched, or sometimes even exceeded, by the local host institutions, the provincial or municipal governments, who were also desperate to attract this talent.
Wait, so a young scientist could easily receive over $1 million, maybe even $2 million, in initial non-competitive startup funding, plus salary, housing, and grant prioritization.
Precisely. It creates an environment of instant enablement. A young researcher would walk into a stable, well-funded position with the resources to hire technicians, staff a large lab, and purchase cutting-edge equipment immediately.
It eliminates that multi-year struggle for funding that you see in the West.
It completely eliminates it. That struggle that plagues early career researchers in so many Western systems.
Yeah.
It's just gone.
We've seen the ambition and the architecture of the recruitment. Now for the ultimate test. Did these generous targeted programs actually succeed? Did they attract and, more importantly, supercharge the output of high-caliber talent?
The data provides a fascinating and empirically verifiable answer. When researchers analyzed the quality of the recruits, particularly for the YTT program, they did something very clever.
What was that?
They compared them to a control group of comparable scientists, so people with Chinese surnames, similar PhDs, and similar research interests who were offered the YTT position but chose to remain overseas.
A perfect comparison group. So what did that show about the quality of the recruit? Did they get the absolute best, the top of the top?
Interestingly, no. The analysis showed that those who rejected the offer were generally a bit more productive pre-return and held slightly more established faculty positions abroad.
So the program fell just short of recruiting the absolute highest caliber.
Right. The top, say, 1% who are already fully embedded, tenured, and established in Western academic ecosystems tended to stay.
But they still attracted high-potential individuals, I assume.
Oh, absolutely. The YTT program successfully drew in elite talent. The vast majority had PhDs from globally top 100 STEM programs. And crucially, prior to returning, these recruits ranked in the top 15th percentile globally in terms of productivity.
So they were already world-class, high-potential scholars.
Yes. The question then becomes, what happens to that high potential when you pair it with massive state resources?
Right. This is where the investment pays off, the post-treatment effect, as researchers call it. What did the data show about their productivity after they returned to this resource-rich Chinese academic environment?
The findings reveal what can only be described as a stunning productivity explosion. The empirical data shows a clear and highly significant positive effect from the generous support and the favorable research conditions. The YTT returnees just significantly increased their research productivity after returning to China.
Give us the hard number. What was the magnitude of that increase?
They produced an average of 27% more publications than their comparable peers who chose to remain in academia overseas.
27%.
And this isn't a marginal difference. This is a massive strategic advantage. And this gain holds true even when you look only at publications in high-impact prestigious journals. It indicates that the Chinese system effectively converts high potential into high output at a substantially faster rate than its Western counterparts.
A 27% increase over peers who are already in elite Western institutions. That is a huge strategic victory. But you mentioned the data showed something even more important than just the sheer volume of papers. It speaks to a fundamental shift in their career trajectory.
This is perhaps the most critical insight for understanding the long-term impact on the global scientific landscape.
Fostering independence.
Exactly. In science, especially in STEM, the authorship position matters profoundly. While the first author usually does the bulk of the lab work, the last authored position conventionally signifies the principal investigator, or PI.
That's the lab leader.
That's the person who secured the funding, leads the lab, directs the research, and owns the ultimate scientific agenda. Becoming a PI is the marker of scientific independence.
So what did the data show about the returnees' ability to become independent PIs?
The data highlights a radical shift. The returnees overperformed in last offered publications by an astonishing 144% compared to their overseas peers.
144%.
Yes, think about what that means. They were nearly 2.5 times more likely to be leading their own research groups, setting their own scientific direction, and controlling the output of their own labs.
That statistic is a window into the systemic failure of one side and the systemic success of the other. Why is that PI role so difficult to secure in the U.S. system for early career researchers?
It boils down to bureaucracy and funding scarcity in the U.S. In the American system, after you get your PhD, a young scientist often spends 5, sometimes 10 years as a postdoctoral researcher. You're essentially working in the lab of an existing senior PI
You're an apprentice, basically.
for a very long time.
Yeah.
And when you finally secure a faculty position, you face this grueling, highly competitive, multi-year period where you're just struggling for foundational grants, like the NIH R01 grant, to prove you can run an independent lab. Until you get that grant, you remain dependent.
So your career path is bottlenecked by a competitive, low success rate funding system.
Exactly. And the YTT program bypasses that bottleneck entirely. By providing the returnee with a multi-million-dollar non-competitive startup package and a secure position, the system effectively hands them instant PI status.
They just skip that whole decade of dependency.
They skip it. They're immediately empowered to pursue their own scientific agendas, hire their own teams, and control their own publication pipeline. The 144% increase in last authored papers is the proof. The program successfully manufactured independent scientific leadership.
And the analysis points directly to the critical role of resources and personnel in driving this success. It wasn't magic, it was funding and infrastructure.
Absolutely. When the researchers statistically controlled for the two key variables, funding size and team size, the publication gains diminish considerably.
So that's the secret sauce.
It confirms that the resource advantage is the transformative factor, not some sudden boost in intellectual capacity upon landing back in Beijing. YTT scientists benefit from these generous startup grants and China's abundant, strategically managed supply of highly educated STEM students.
So a scientist who might struggle to staff a lab of 4 or 5 people in the West can instantly scale up to a team of 10 or 15 technicians, postdocs, and graduate students in China.
Precisely. And this resource advantage is particularly transformative in fields requiring significant physical assets and large teams.
Like what?
Chemistry, material science, life sciences. Fields where the cost of instruments and reagents is high and the speed of experimentation relies on sheer manpower. China built the ideal ecosystem for high-caliber talent to succeed, making the choice to return a matter of strategic career advancement.
This systematic attraction and nurturing of talent has had a direct, measurable impact on the global standing of Chinese universities and research institutions. The programs aren't just attracting individuals, they are elevating entire academic ecosystems.
The institutional elevation is undeniable. The Chinese Academy of Sciences, CAS, which hosts many of these returnees, is now reported as holding the global top spot with 3,615 high-level scientists.
And that count surpassed whom?
Institutions like Harvard and Stanford. The intellectual capital is concentrated in major hubs like Beijing and Shanghai, and in leading universities like Tsinghua and Zhejiang University. These institutions are now attracting global attention not just for their size, but for the proven high-impact research coming out of the labs run by these returnees. The entire scientific gravity of the nation is shifting.
So now we have to transition to the massive geopolitical consequences of this scientific reversal, this strategic knowledge shift. We've established that the talent is leaving, and when they arrive back in China, they become hyper-productive leaders. Individual decisions are becoming macro power moves.
And this is where we have to connect the dots to the highest levels of strategic planning. This shift isn't just an internal Chinese success story. It is confirmed as a major strategic concern by Western governments themselves. Well, the U.S. government's perspective acknowledges the clear strategic goal of these programs. They see them as being designed to systematically gain access to cutting-edge research and expertise, to benefit from U.S. government-funded research, and to transfer that knowledge to impact the Chinese economy and its strategic technological goals.
So they see it as a deliberate strategy. Let's look at the hard data on the scale and speed of this brain gain. This isn't a trickle, it's a torrent.
It is happening with unprecedented rapidity. Since 2010, the sheer volume is staggering. Nearly 20,000 foreign-educated scientists have left the U.S.
20,000.
But the real urgency is seen in the global share of high-level experts. Look at the period between 2020 and 2024. China's share of global high-level technology experts grew substantially, climbing from 16.9% to 27.9%.
A huge jump in just 4 years. And what happened to the U.S. share during that exact same period?
In the same period, the U.S. share shrank significantly, moving from 32.8% down to 27.3%.
Wow. So what this statistic reveals is that in just 4 years, China has achieved near parity with the U.S. in the global share of the most sought-after technological experts.
They are closing the gap, not through internal education alone, but by strategically repatriating talent. This means the engine of future innovation is rapidly diversifying, and the U.S. is losing its historic dominance in human capital.
That shift in market share is startling. Let's look at why these scientists are choosing to return. It's never purely economic, is it? What are the powerful emotional and strategic pull factors that draw them back?
No, it's not just the money. Beyond the massive financial packages we discussed, there are powerful intrinsic motivations. Many returnees genuinely view the move as a national mission.
A mission.
Yes, they have a deep desire to contribute directly to the national modernization and development project, to bridge the knowledge they gained in the West with China's domestic needs, particularly in areas like clean energy or biomedicine.
There's also the element of operational effectiveness, right? The system itself promises a faster path from A to B.
Exactly. They are attracted to the prestige that comes with national service and, critically, the ability to operate in a system that accelerates the timeline from an idea to implementation. In fast-moving, competitive fields like AI, high-tech manufacturing, and biotech, bureaucratic hurdles and slow funding cycles can cost you years.
And years can be an eternity in those fields.
It can be the difference between leading and following. China offers the promise of rapid deployment and large-scale testing, which is incredibly seductive to an ambitious researcher.
Now we have to address the flip side. The Western actions that acted as a powerful, unintended catalyst, the push factor that fueled China's recruitment success. This is where the story of that chemist in Kansas comes back into sharp focus.
Right. The climate of suspicion and legal scrutiny within the U.S., particularly after the launch of initiatives intended to curb economic espionage, acted as a systemic push factor. The stated intention was to lock down intellectual property, but the execution, well, it created a climate of mistrust and professional insecurity for many ethnically Chinese researchers, regardless of their citizenship or loyalty.
We saw it with the chemist, who was fully acquitted in 2024. Despite proving his innocence after 5 grueling years, his reputation was shattered, his lab dissolved, and the essential trust with his colleagues was just irrevocably broken.
He is a prime example of the U.S. system self-sabotaging and inadvertently supporting China's talent strategy. And think also of Sun, the Berkeley mathematician, or Sun Xiaokang, the cancer researcher. These were established, high-performing experts who called the U.S. home for decades.
They weren't just passing through.
Not at all. They left because the environment became toxic, the investigations, the bureaucratic delays, the requirement to hire lawyers, it all just became unsustainable.
So the return of these acquitted or investigated researchers validates this feeling that they were moving from being a suspect in one system to a strategic asset in another.
That phrase captures the strategic logic perfectly. For China, these scientists are proof points. They're evidence that the West is unwelcoming and that the future lies back home. The unintended consequence of the heightened scrutiny was that it dramatically accelerated the movement of top-tier talent, precisely when China was offering million-dollar incentives and instant independence.
The West created the supply of unhappy, high-potential returnees.
And China had perfected the demand.
This dynamic introduces a critical concept into global competition: strategic knowledge mobility and its result, what you'd call innovation asymmetry. What does innovation asymmetry mean in this context?
Innovation asymmetry means that the fundamental balance of where knowledge is created and where it is applied has become skewed. Historically, the U.S. model relied on attracting the world's best talent, often training them with massive U.S. government grants from the NIH, the NSF, for basic fundamental blue sky research.
So the U.S. pays for the basic science, the discovery phase.
Exactly. But now, due to this systemic push-pull dynamic, the intellectual capital, the person who understands how to turn that basic research into a commercial or strategic application, is flowing systematically back to China.
So the U.S. is funding the expensive fundamental stage.
Only for China to capture the completed high-potential researcher who can then lead the commercial application and strategic innovation. That creates a huge strategic imbalance in technologically sensitive areas.
And this flow directly threatens the traditional U.S. model of university science, which has always relied so heavily on international students and postdocs to carry out the vast majority of its research agenda.
It threatens the entire pipeline. The U.S. system functions by relying on low-cost, high-skill labor provided by international students who are seeking expertise and opportunity. If China, through these powerful and generous programs like YTT, successfully builds an academic ecosystem that attracts these young, high-potential scholars directly,
it starves the U.S. research pipeline of its essential labor.
It does. And if you don't get the young talent, the U.S. system cannot sustain its output, while China is rapidly increasing its own output through instant PI status and massive funding.
And that is the core geopolitical implication.
That's it. The competition for human capital has shifted from simple university recruitment battles to a core geopolitical dynamic. When you combine the strategic governmental backing of MIC 2025 with the talent magnetism of the TTP and YTT programs, China is not just competing, it is actively positioning itself to dominate and lead the next industrial revolution, powered by the very talent that Western systems once nurtured.
So synthesizing this massive shift, what we've observed is this integrated end-to-end strategic process that really leaves nothing to chance. It starts with the top-level government planning in Made in China 2025, which identifies the critical sectors and allocates trillions of dollars for infrastructure and research.
Solid foundation.
That foundation is then paired with the comprehensive recruitment architecture, the TTP and YTT programs, which are designed not just to recruit, but to create an irresistible economic and professional package for high-caliber talent through competitive, often locally matched financial resources.
And those resources create the ideal academic environment. They enable returning scientists to skip the years of struggle, launch independent labs immediately, and significantly increase their research output, particularly in those pivotal, globally competitive fields identified in the national plan.
It's a closed loop of national strategic success.
It is. This entire endeavor is truly about nation building through scientific mastery, executed on a massive scale.
And the final takeaway for you is?
The true measure of China's success is not just the number of scientists recruited, but the fact that the nation has successfully and systematically built an academic ecosystem that can now effectively compete for, nurture, and strategically apply the world's highest level of scientific intellect. This integrated approach has fundamentally repositioned the country as a world leader in scientific innovation, altering the landscape of global knowledge creation for decades to come.